apology, that would have been good enough, assuming Reverend Ray Drennan did not reoffend. But as seems to be incredibly typical of Unitarian Universalists, Reverend Ray Drennan was obstinately unapologetic, and on top of that, you know, the leadership of the church and the leadership of the Unitarian Universalist Association was similarly unapologetic. And in fact, they soon attacked me for complaining about Reverend Ray Drennan's anti-religious intolerance and bigotry and so on. I was lambasted by UUA President Reverend Dr. John Burens. You know, I sent a copy of my complaint down to the Unitarian Universalist Association in the hopes that they would oversee, you know, that they would take steps to ensure that it was properly handled at the local level. I didn't actually file a complaint against Reverend Ray Drennan with the UUA, you know, formally, but as a result of sending my local complaint down to them to be, you know, to have some oversight over it, it was basically treated as if it was a complaint against him. It was passed on to Reverend Diane Miller, who at the time was the executive secretary of the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, which deals with complaints against clergy misconduct. And essentially, they just whitewashed Reverend Ray Drennan's intolerance and bigotry. And in fact, they said that Reverend Ray Drennan's behavior, as I described it in my letter of grievance, which was quite detailed, and actually included more than just, you know, the main thrust of his attack on me, but other behavior, you know, his refusal to apologize and so on. They said it seemed to us to be within the appropriate guidelines of ministerial leadership. So they're essentially saying that, you know, it was within the appropriate guidelines of ministerial leadership for Reverend Ray Drennan to rudely interrupt me as I'm trying to explain a religious experience to him and label it as a psychotic experience. And likewise, it was within the appropriate guidelines of ministerial leadership for Reverend Ray Drennan to rudely interrupt me as I'm trying to explain an interreligious event to him, you know, labeling the interreligious event as a cult. I should point out that by definition, an interreligious event cannot possibly be a cult. You know, a cult is a religious group of one mind, as it were, of, you know, one specific belief. You know, an interreligious event brings together a variety of different religious groups. It's just, you know, just not reasonable to try to construe an interreligious event as being a cult, but that's what Reverend Ray Drennan did. And I should also add that the president of the Unitarian Church of Montreal at the time, Frank Green, had done likewise, and in fact he had even made a snide remark suggesting a link between the interreligious event Creation Day and the Solar Temple cult about a year earlier, or a year and a half to 2 years earlier max, when I celebrated the first observance of Creation Day. So that's today's little monologue about the beginnings of this protest. And the reason I do that is because earlier today, Yves Masseau, who's a Quebec province Unitarian Universalist, I'm not sure if he's a member of the Unitarian Church of Montreal or not, but he clearly identifies as a Quebec Unitarian Universalist, and he said I was malade for protesting against the Unitarian Universalist Association's misuse of Canada's blasphemy law in legal bullying that's intended to cover up and hide such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape committed by Unitarian Universalists. And then sometime later, another person was reading my unsafe sect picket sign, and all I heard was sect, and I didn't understand. I thought she might also be saying I was sick, and so I had a little discussion with her about that. I'm not sure if it was recorded or not. I suspect not. But anyhow, kind of hoping it was recorded. So that's it. This protest began in May of 1998, at least in part as a protest against being maliciously pathologized by Reverend Ray Drennan and other Unitarian Universalists, Montreal Unitarians, and they're still at it. They're still doing it. So, all right.
How are you?
Not too bad.
Good.
Oh, Mr. Dara.
Yes.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Well, I'm basking in the glory of being accused of blasphemous libel by Unitarian Universalists. That's a newish development. Canadian Criminal Code, Section 296, the cease and desist demand letter said, your unfounded and vicious allegations to the effect that ministers of the association engage in such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape are defamatory, and that they're so defamatory that they constitute the criminal act of blasphemous libel. So I wrote back to the lawyer, and I said, I'm having considerable...
That was sent by the church?
Not the church locally, this was by the Vatican down in Boston, the head office. The Unitarian Universalist Association hired Stikeman Elliott, barristers and solicitors, major Canadian corporate law firm, a very reputable lawyer, one of the top 100 litigation lawyers in Canada, Maitre Marc-André Coulombe, to accuse me of this and some other things. So I wrote back to him, and I told him, well, I'm having considerable difficulty finding blog posts that match your description of unfounded vicious allegations, blah, blah, blah. Can you please provide me with titles, URLs, dates, something, so that I can go and look and decide how I want to govern myself? Because, down at the bottom it says, do govern yourself accordingly. Of course, it was like, take down this stuff. So he writes back to me, and are you ready for a long story here? He writes back to me, and he says, your claims not to be able to find the offending material are not credible. And I was saying I'm a liar. So I had to write back to him and say, no, you don't understand. I know where I wrote about pedophiles and rapists. I just don't know where the unfounded stuff is. Never heard from him again, but he heard from me. And he's still hearing from me because he hasn't retracted. If you don't retract, you're still accusing me. So, so yes, it's a unique honor and privilege to be accused of blasphemy in the 21st century by atheist Unitarians. It's a feather in my cap. So how are you?
Good.
Yeah. You're teaching now? Retired, I believe? Yeah.
How'd you know that?
What?
How'd you know that?
Well, every now and then I get visits to my blog on searches for Scott Dara. I mean, you're barely mentioned on it, as you probably know. But I do get searches, and then, so when I followed those Google searches back, it became clear that you were at John Abbott teaching and so on.
Yeah, I've had enough.
Had enough of that too?
No, I had enough of
Yeah, had enough of the whole, yeah. Anyhow, we had our little thing at the Police Ethics Commission, and I accept that. I think it went reasonably well. So I don't hold anything against you or anything.
Yeah. Good luck with it.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just doing a little monologue about, Unitarian Universalists, pathologizing me as, seriously mentally ill. In fact, earlier today, one of them said I was malad. Do you still think I'm mentally ill?
We don't have to go there.
Okay, well, we did. It would be nice to have some reassurance that, I mean, I can understand. Well, put it this way, I'd be curious, because you never really said, why specifically you characterized me that way. Like, what was it about me that in your mind suggested I was mentally ill?
No comment.
No comment?
I don't have to go there anymore.
No, you don't have to. No.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Right.
Anyways, good luck with it.
Thank you. You too. Good life. Yeah. So, that's interesting. Oh, and we got it all recorded. and I'm sure he knew I was recording. That's Sergeant Detective Scott Dara, or I should say retired Sergeant Detective Scott Dara, who back in 2010, June of 2010 if I'm not mistaken, basically said I was mentally ill in a meeting I had with him, in which he was trying to intimidate me into ending my protest. But anyway, we're basically on reasonably good terms, as we can hear. You know, I took him to the Police Ethics Commission as a result of his intimidation, which included, you know, very assertively saying that, you know, you are mentally ill, and then later reaffirming that on record when I was recording my protest. You know, so we had a little discussion about that, and then his general, you know, undue intimidation, you know, which was intended to get me to stop protesting. But yeah, that's a thing of the past. It was dealt with in a reasonable manner by the Police Ethics Commission, and so he doesn't want to really deal with that anymore, and that's fine. You know, we can let that one go under the bridge. But as I told him, you know, when you bring an accusation against me and you don't withdraw it, you know, I mean, if it's true, I'll admit it. You know, if someone accuses me of something and they're right, as a rule, I'll say, you know what, you're right. You know, I'll try and fix that or whatever, or apologize or whatever. But if someone brings a false accusation against me and they don't withdraw it, well, as far as I'm concerned, they're standing by it. And if they don't withdraw it, well, they're still accusing me, even if it's like so many years later. So it was kind of nice to see Scott Dara, and that was a surprise, absolutely not expected. So yes, it's nice to be on reasonably good terms with him, and I generally am on reasonably good terms with police officers who are halfway competent. You know, definitely had a problem with his behavior in the past, but we dealt with it. And you know, there's other cops that have messed up. But yeah, it was nice to have a little chat with Scott Dara. And like I said, I'm pretty sure he knew this was being recorded. He saw the camera, he knows what happened in the past where I recorded a little visit he had here.